Hey, it's Coach Taylor here from SmarterTeamTraining.com. As always, I'm looking for a way to gain an edge, and I'm always trying to find a unique technology to really add to my programming. And I'm honestly constantly on a search for something that can really add to anything, whether it's a computer, whether it's massage. And one big concept that I'm really struggling with and actually kind of thinking about how we can justify other things is I really try to base everything around how well can we do a repetition. How well can we do this individual repetition? Be able to provide feedback to the athlete or the client that we're working with, I think, is unbelievably important. And I got a chance to meet Skip Cronin from EliteForm the other day, and he has a really cool technology. And I asked him to come on the show here for a little bit just to talk about technology as a whole, a little bit about what he's got going on, and really just trying to answer the questions in my head. So, Skip, man, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day here, and I'm looking forward to just learning from you and just talking some shop.
Appreciate you having me on, and just looking forward to the conversation. You know, a lot of what we do is kind of new, the industry, and so happy to just chat about it and take things from there.
Skip, before we get started here, I don't know a lot about you. I know a lot about I probably know more about your technologies than I do about you as a person. And again, for being transparent here on the show, we just sent a couple emails back and forth, talked a few times, and then we said, let's rock and roll. So can you tell me a little bit about your background, how you got started in the field, and really what makes you tick?
Oh, absolutely. So my history in terms of sport is really through being an athlete. EliteForm essentially began as a project that a company called Nebraska Global, who's our holding company, was doing with the University of Nebraska. And it was just this idea of we were going to try to find kind of a better way to measure power and velocity. And so the founders of this company actually knew me from a previous life, a previous job. Knew about my athletic history. I had almost gone into coaching at one point. Life led me in a different direction. They knew I kind of had a background that no one else at Nebraska Global had. And so once they reached a point where they thought, instead of this being a project, EliteForm might become an actual business, I started getting calls from the founders and just kind of laying a groundwork for coming across and taking kind of this one-off black box item to the world at large and actually trying to form a company out of it. Was an athlete through college, blew out my rotator cuff and ended that early. And so from there, though, I tried to make some choices in terms of, do I want to go into coaching? Do I want to study kinesiology? Those kinds of things. And I ended up basically being that guy. It's kind of like Goodwill Hunting, right? I don't have a formal degree. I've got a library card and I'm incredibly well-read, and then had the background of going through training as an athlete, as well as kind of the business side, my work experience, and those things kind of gelled into me driving the ship here.
I know you have a pretty unique technology here, and a lot of times with the camera-type setups, it's kind of hard to see. As we discussed a little bit before the show, a lot of times coaches and athletes are visual-type people. And before we start talking about that technology aspect of it, I want to talk a little bit or ask you a question about what things went easy and what things were difficult that you kind of went through when you were developing the products.
Well, it's interesting. I came on after some of those efforts had been done. And so I really got to see kind of where the warts were, the hard parts, as well as then kind of what things had been done right. And so, my first day, software developers tend to do this thing called a stand-up. And my first day, we're in the stand-up. They're talking about some of the work that had been done. We were already tracking athletes moving a bar. Then somebody asked the question, is there a proper way to do a squat? And so immediately in my head, I'm thinking, what in the world did I just get myself into, right? Well, what am I going to find out next? What's around the next corner in terms of what are we missing? And so, one of the hard parts for us was this. We started developing this product, as I mentioned, in conjunction with the University of Nebraska. And so we didn't have a domain expert on staff that knew about how different guys train throughout the country, throughout the world. So, like you've got a great context, and your show gives a lot of people great context in terms of, you'll hear various speakers talk about what's important to them, how they train, how they make athletes better. And at the point in time I stepped on board, we knew one story. We knew what the University of Nebraska did. And obviously, Nebraska is well known for their strength program, great history with Boyd Epley, et cetera. That's the one piece that we knew. And so I came in and we took a product that was a project, and we then had to start working to make it well-rounded so that if you use different training protocols, if you saw velocity or power in a different light, we still had something that made sense for you, not just for one particular client, so to speak. And so, we had product X and we needed to make it product XYZ. And that was a bit of a learning curve. And so I always joke that I'm just the translator because, the one thing that I can do is I can talk to strength coaches and have a pretty decent conversation about what they're trying to get done, things that they need. But then I've got to turn around and talk to our team here and essentially tell them what that means in terms of writing code, what that means in terms of making a true technology-based product actually fit in with what a coach is trying to do to make an athlete better. And so kind of bridging those gaps, isn't always the easiest thing in the world to do because those aren't like folks. They don't hang out in similar communities. And so we've got to find a way to bring all of that together to make things tick.
Sometimes integrating technology into a program, there's a little bit of a kickback kind of scenario because it's new. And like anything in life, sometimes the new thing, it gets a little bit of a rough spot on people when we get going here. I mean, what are some things that I should know about integrating an EliteForm type product into my training program that I should know before it gets started? I mean, should I be trying to prep my athletes or prep the coaches? Or what have you seen that's worked really, really well in your world?
Well, what's interesting is, and it's not just with EliteForm, it's really with any technology, you really have to look at a technology and kind of say to yourself, fundamentally, does it fit in with what I'm doing, right? So for us, we're measuring velocity and power. And if you don't believe in that, our product's going to be less valuable for you. But then there's also how much is this product basically going to interrupt or make me change what I already do, right? So you've got to have kind of a belief in what it's giving back to you, and then a belief that it works with your program and your system. We spent quite a bit of time saying this. We've really got two folks that we need to interact with. You've got the athletes themselves, and you've got the staff. Anytime any coach is evaluating the use of any technology, they need to know that I'm still able to get done what I need to get done outside of that technology. If we're talking about an NCAA regulation that says I've got X amount of time with my athletes in a given day, you've got to know that technology is not slowing down your workflow. You've got to know that when an athlete steps to the rack, in our case, and they start going through their card, that they're still able to get to those things that are important to you that maybe the technology augments or makes more efficient without taking away from some of those other things you want to do. So no technology right now touches every aspect of training. Eventually, will it get there? We would like to think so. But unless you kind of take the time to say, fundamentally, how is this going to function within my program, you can end up with technologies that draw you away from what you're trying to do and not necessarily always making your program better. And kind of that idea of workflow is something that can get missed because people get focused on what that individual technology actually does and sometimes miss how it fits into your program. So you've got to kind of take all of that into account whenever you implement, any sort of technology, whether it's a GPS system, right, where I'm tracking movements across the larger field, or something like us where it's very specific to stepping into a rack area, specific environment, and measuring athletic movements from there.
For anyone who hasn't seen EliteForm on different trade shows, et cetera, it's basically a box that attaches to, let's say, the top of a squat rack and then a touch screen kind of unit. And my question to you, Skip, is, how do the cameras actually work? And are you actually ever loading something onto the bar? Is it kind of like an accelerometer thing, or is it all computer generated? Yeah,
Rob, that's a great question because we have taken a platform that we think makes a lot more sense than using a physical item in terms of the weight room. And so there are a couple of simple ways that I just kind of try to describe it for folks. One is if people have seen an Xbox Connect gaming system, they're more familiar with our technology than they may think because we use what's called a 3D depth camera. But essentially what it does is it shoots little infrared plus signs out into an area we define, which is essentially your platform area, for example, on a rack. And then we see everything that moves in that space. You don't have to have a physical device like an accelerometer to measure movement. what you end up doing is you end up telling those cameras, okay, I see a human form. That human form needs to be in the proper positioning to do a squat. So you're defining that movement to the camera, and then you're telling the camera to look for a bar. We see the entire bar, and then we measure the movement center of the bar in, say, a squat in particular, in that scene. And so that sounds very high-minded, and it really is truly I need to see it to have it make sense. So, Rob, if you've ever seen like the Predator movies, literally when the Predator is looking in infrared, that's not too dissimilar from what we see with the cameras, because we can then determine how far away an object is, type of object that it is, and so any given movement we can then define and say, measure item X within that scene. So we started with Olympic lifts and presses because they're fundamental to a lot of programs. And as I mentioned, they gave us a very clear development spot. But the one thing that we love about this technology, as opposed to, say, an accelerometer, is we're not inhibiting workflow. And then we can just keep defining more and more movements as basically the people we work with kind of define their need. You know, we have a laundry list of things in what we call a backlog. Our clients come in and say, hey, Skip, we want to measure XYZ. Like right now we were discussing some prep protocols with a few of our clients and talking about potentially doing like a jump squat module where we're measuring preparedness based on some of those velocity numbers. Well, we can also then begin to look at how the human form is deviating within that. So basically, am I getting sloppy because I'm very tired and maybe I need to shut a guy down at that point, give him some rest because I know that, maybe the past week's training's been a little bit too much for him. And it's those kind of things that we can build upon simply because we see an entire area in 3 dimensions and can take really almost any sort of physical measurement out of that scene that we need to give a coach something to work with.
How have you taken the feedback from the coaches that have actually been using the product in the field and developed or expanded your product line? Can you walk me a little bit through that process of how you've upgraded the technology throughout the years that you've been involved here?
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of one of where a lot of my passion sits. I get very hung up on the idea of how to make athletes better. That's probably the most fun that I have in my job. With anybody that we work with, we just have good conversation. We try to be reasonably well-versed on how the variety of ways you can train an athlete, because there's certainly more than one way to skin a cat. But can we take that and make it a part of the technology? A lot of it is very collaborative. Guys are preparing to get published. They'll send me notes about what they're working on. Or if they are seeing deviations in somebody's numbers in some way, we'll talk about what that might mean. And so when we reach a point where we really think, say, it's worth adding a new particular lift or looking at data in a particular way, we'll have conversations to generate some reports with our clients to get an idea if we're on the same track. But what's great about this is, Rob, say you and I are working on something and you tell me this particular lift, Skip, is going to be fundamental to what I'm doing for the next 6 weeks, and I really would like to track it. Well, the fact that you want to do that and you have guys working out the rack with our technology is actually what helps us make the system better. Because what we'll do is we'll actually pull video of your athletes and we'll basically mark that video so that we can see how we need to measure that particular movement. We feed the video of that work into a supercomputer, and that is actually what helps us generate an algorithm to then conduct better measurements. So literally, our clients are at the forefront of the process of improving our product. They, in a way, make their own program better through working with us. And that's sort of the part of it that I love, is that we have a platform to continually have conversations with coaches about what they need next. So we can avoid kind of this idea of becoming obsolete simply due to the fact that our development process is hands-on for the coaches and the athletes as well.
I've had a chance to talk to a lot of CEOs on the show and just throughout the travels, and always the topic of branding comes up and how important is developing a brand when offering a product to the public, and what things do you consider before the release? I mean, I think you guys have done a great job using the name EliteForm as far as defining repetition and having some type of hierarchy as far as making a rep better. And I want to know if you actually thought that through, or, I mean, can you tell me a little bit about that whole process of branding?
Oh, absolutely. Branding, to me, is very important because it's a representation of who you are. And it's kind of that simple. We take a very sort of straightforward approach with what we do. Try to basically explain what we do. We know it's not going to be necessarily for everybody right now. If we feel like if there's value there, people will at least kind of earmark and say those guys are doing the right things. And branding becomes a part of that. So when you look at the basis for our efforts in terms of technology, a lot of it is taking the idea of what was once perception-based in terms of training and making it objective, giving me an actual number that I can pin down and say, this is what that guy did today. Coaches are excellent at seeing athletes and understanding kind of output that they're getting, but sometimes they're not able to quantify that. And that idea of taking great knowledge that's often sort of was inherited or kind of an apprenticeship, and then proving out really that these guys know exactly what they're talking about, because that's often what happens when we start measuring. We want to extend that into our look and feel as a company, extend that into how we talk to folks. A lot of the images that we use in our brand are meant to tell that story. As we were first coming up with kind of our branding ideas, one of the things that we talked about was there's that classic image from Da Vinci where he's literally got the human form out and it's measured. Not that people knew it then, but that has been proven to be kind of dead-on correct over time. That idea of quantification and having there be an art to that quantification is something we've tried to put forward. And so my hope is that when people even get kind of a quick look and feel on EliteForm in terms of our site or any sort of collateral they may grab at a show, they're getting a quick understanding that what we're doing is science-based, objective, all with the idea of making athletes better and kind of making them engage and buy in to what their coaches are trying to accomplish with them. And if we've done that, I think we've done a pretty good job.
How have you seen your technology here, EliteForm as a whole, being used most commonly? Is it just only on the rack? Is it being used in the dumbbell area or machines or free weights or outside? I mean, what's the most common way you're seeing the piece being used?
It kind of gets divided in a couple different camps, and some of that is budget-based. Some of that is just kind of the fundamentals around problems that coaches are trying to solve. Initially, when we started out, we were really focused around velocity and power and trying to create a better way really to kind of capture those two measurements, right? What is interesting about technology is sometimes you have to take a half step back and understand that the problems that need solved or the help that really anybody, any given industry may need, may not necessarily be the most complicated thing in the world to do, and maybe it's not super complicated technology, but it helps everyone if you fix it. And so we started at the rack, and what we discovered was the idea of creating a paperless room, creating just sort of a more simple way for coaches to create a card instead of like using Excel is pretty common, creating a simple way to get workouts to athletes that are remote were also something that was pretty important to folks. And, you know, we're not going to put any patents around the idea of sending a workout to somebody's phone. It became obvious very quickly that, hey, great, you've got a workout that's showing up at the rack, but I've got guys that are going to move over into a dumbbell area, and their card's not going to be there. So am I now having to print a card and then have guys walk around with it, even though I've got this thing up on a tablet on the rack? And so what we've seen is this. People will get our rack systems, and they will focus on velocity and power, or they'll start off by really wanting kind of that paperless communication with their athletes. It'll be kind of an either or at times, or then where our system really sort of kicks in and you get the most out of it is when you combine the two. When you have that ability to, Rob, if you're training me, shoot my workout really to the internet, and then I can pull it down at the rack. I can pull it down on my phone if I'm home for the holidays, and at all points in time, you're getting information back on what I've done in real time so that you can help continue my progressions and continue to train me, better information back to you faster. So there's sort of full accountability all around. And so, it's really A, B, or C. Do you want the communication? Do you want the power and velocity numbers? Or do you want it all? And those are the three camps. And so some people grow into C, some people go with C right away. In all cases, there are bits and pieces of what we do that add value, and that's kind of what we hope to continue. If one part of it's not right for somebody, we're perfectly fine with that. We're just trying to make things better.
I want to talk to you a little bit as a businessman and a business leader in the field here, and I want to ask you a little bit about your journey, and I want to know, can you tell me a little bit about some of maybe the bumps in the roads along your path and maybe some of the success stories? I mean, how have your experiences molded you into the businessman you are today?
Well, I kind of come from what I would call the school of hard knocks. So my degrees coming out of college were, like, for example, I have a philosophy degree. I have a creative writing degree. I don't have an MBA. I didn't study in school to, try to run a company or anything like that. I really just kind of went about it as I'm going to do some things that lead me to become a very good critical thinker. And then sort of that ability to think on my feet hopefully would turn into some value down the road, right? Straight out of school, I didn't have a resume that allowed me to jump into, say, like a mid-level position. I just started kind of a classic support guy, moved into kind of a sales business development role, and then kind of learned through the school of hard knocks. So I've made probably every mistake you can make in terms of growing my knowledge base as a person into trying to manage a business. And so, with EliteForm particularly, some of those mistakes were a benefit because we were starting out and taking really a project technology and trying to make it business. And so there's some very sort of simple blocking and tackling that you have to do to understand that you're doing things hopefully in the right way. And so things like understanding who it is you're talking to when you're trying to understand if you have value for someone in terms of them actually, turning interest into a purchase. And so, from an EliteForm standpoint, there were definitely some things that we didn't know. Like we didn't initially know as a company how many different, say, strength cards that people will create, the variants, the nuance. And so when I came on board, it was, hey, I don't think everybody does it this way. Let's go out and have some conversations. Let's talk to folks about what they would want to see in terms of how they would put some cards together. Because initially, we would look at how they could create a card, and they would say, you know what, this isn't how we do things. And for us, it wasn't fundamentally about trying to change people's mindsets about doing things our way. It was, if we're going to be a quality tool, we need to make those adjustments and become a quality tool based on everyone, or as close to everyone as possible, because you can't please everybody in the industry. The other thing that we really caught us off guard a little bit, I would say, in terms of selling technology into the strength and conditioning world is how long it takes to sort of go through the process of purchasing, say at a college institution, because there are a lot of layers to get through. And so you can have the biggest proponents who definitely see the value in what you're doing, but it is not as if they can leave the lot today in that car. They really have to get approvals, follow process, and we weren't particularly aware of that when we started, particularly at a higher level. Founders, board members understood, there are a lot of dollars in athletics. Well, there may be a lot of dollars. People know what they're doing with every penny, and they're going to be smart about how they spend those dollars. And so we had to learn to be patient a little bit, understand how to work with folks who may think you have a great idea, great solution, but now was not the time. Time may be down the road when I have a new facility that I'm building. The time may be next budget cycle. those kinds of things. And so understanding just basically where to place ourselves and how to have conversations was certainly where we kind of missed right away. We just thought, people will write checks. This will be no big deal. Well, it is a big deal, and we need to respect that when we talk to folks.
I know you get a chance to work with a bunch of people there, and again within the community of the field as a whole. Is there one big motivational message you have when you get a chance to talk to people and try to enlighten their day that you wouldn't mind sharing here?
From a motivational standpoint, it really kind of comes down to engage in the things that you know you can impact and will make you better. And what I mean by that is this. We all have a lot of things that go on around us, and some of those things kind of will impact us, but they're not important. And some of those things are important, but there's not a darn thing we can do about it. And if you can find that middle ground, right, those key pieces that will make you better, whether it's when you step into the facility to train, whether it's being better as a business person, keep in mind those immediate things that are important are going to take care of a lot of the other ancillary stuff that floats around you. And so that's what we try to do with the product. That's what I try to do on a daily basis when I sit down and start talking to coaches. And, I think if people can avoid the minutia and focus on those key aspects they can control and that they know are important, they're going to be much better off in the long run.
Well, Skip, man, I really appreciate taking some time out of your day. I know you're a busy guy, and hopefully this interview and us getting a chance to talk on the phone for a little bit is a cool launching pad for us to do things in the future here. I'm very interested in technology. Again, I've seen it at a couple different locations. I'm interested in just honestly learning more about it. So if there's anybody on the show here that wanted to either reach out to you personally to find out more about technology, to find out more about becoming a better business person, or just to find out more information about EliteForm, how could they go about reaching out to you?
I'm always happy to have a chat. I can be emailed at scronin, SCRONIN, @EliteForm.com. We're always happy to take a call, 402-875-5590, extension 329. Rob, appreciate the chat. I'd love to have you actually do some work in front of one of our systems sometime, so you can get a true look and feel for what it's like as an athlete. I'd offer that out to anybody else as well. We've got kind of a nice situation where we have clients all over the country, and our coaches are always pretty open in terms of having folks in. So always happy to make connections for people.
Again, Skip, man, I look forward to just keeping in touch. Thank you very much for getting on the show today, and nice job with the talk, man. I really appreciate it. I took a bunch of notes, and I'm sure I'm going to fire a ton of questions your way here to follow up. Good luck, man. Have a great weekend, and hope all is well, buddy.
All right. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. Take care.